Hi, my name is Jonas, and this week our topic is sexuality and intersectionality. In defining sexuality, an expert from the Kingsley book utilized the triad of sexuality, which is attraction, behavior, and identity to talk about sexual orientation. Now, I quote: the cumulative experience of interaction of erotic fantasy, romantic, emotional feelings, and sexual behavior directed at one or both sexes. That is sexual orientation, and that defines sexuality for us. Therefore, in defining sexuality, a good phrase that comes up is sexual orientation. Sexuality is about our orientation. Sexuality encompasses a wide variety of sexual identities or preferences. It is a wholesome category which, like gender, is also fluid. According to Professor Staley, sexuality is the defining topic or human rights topic of our time. And I agree. Sexuality involves how we choose or not choose to live out our sexual preferences or lack thereof, which is our constitution, which constitutes our sexual ideas. Intersectionality, on the other hand, are the interactions involving our various identity components of within us, within ourselves. Sexuality intersects with gender, and conversations of gender do cross over to sexuality, and yet they are distinct fields or distinct categories. When we talk about sexuality, we should not just talk about or imagine sexual minorities like the LGBTQ, as we saw in the alphabet soup of sexualities. We should also include the default category, which is heterosexuality, in order for us to acquire a more balanced, a more open, a more wide view of what sexuality encompasses. It's not simply the minorities, it also incorporates heterosexuality, which is default. Now, we saw last week in gender that masculinity comprises the default within that category, the default category, which is hidden, which is concealed. Not too many people like to include masculinity in the discussions that are going on. And so for our topic this week, sexuality is also the default category, and it's hidden, it's concealed, and we ought to bring it on the table so that our conversations can be more balanced and more complete. Now, when you are dealing with sexuality, there are key questions that do come up. For example, it does involve issues of training children. When do you start talking about sex, for example, or sexuality, and how do you approach it? Who starts talking? At what age? Issues of sex, when should you recommend, or when should children start having the first sexual experience? Issues of marriage can come in. Is marriage in the purview of this conversation? Does culture prevent or restrict marriage? Does it encourage marriage? At what age? In other words, who chooses? So we have seen that sexuality is not simply an issue in isolation. It involves not only culture, it interacts with our whole being. Our constitution involves our class, it involves our religion, it involves everything that constitutes us.
And then it dawned on me that Reba might be.
Hi, my name is Aaron. I'm 28 years old, and I was born in Jamaica, raised in the United States, and I was also raised Adventist. The first thing I would like to talk about was the relationship between my father, my mother, and my stepfather. The relationship with both individuals were unhealthy. My stepfather was not, my father was not dependable or, financially there for me consistently. My stepfather did provide, but, the relationship dynamic between my mom and him was not good. She was basically put in a dependent position where she had to depend on him for everything, and he took advantage of that. And amongst other things, he just was not a good role model, or a good father figure to have. That also translated into how I feel, I guess, my role in a relationship. As a West Indian, I don't mind being submissive, or I don't mind taking care of my husband. However, I won't be a doormat, as long as I feel like I can be self-sufficient, I don't mind coming second and, taking care of my husband. That's also in line with my religion, as, we do believe that the husband is the head of the home. So I don't necessarily have to wear the pants to be happy. I just want to be respected and loved. That also influenced me early in adulthood with the relationship that I chose to have, Basically, after some self-searching, I realized that I chose this person. I chose to be with this person, even though I knew, he was going to disappoint me based on the fact that I knew what was going to happen. It was an expected outcome that I would be disappointed. I knew that, he was not the right person, or he was going to be there for me, the way I needed. And basically, that just boils down to me being surrounded by men, that which is more positive examples, and just always disappointed me. So I just felt like I would rather be in a position where I know I'm going to be disappointed, rather than be optimistic in a relationship and then be disappointed. I was just more comfortable with that. Also, my views on homosexuality, transgender, those things. The church, as well as West Indians, don't really tolerate that type of thing. They don't agree with that type of lifestyle. West Indians in particular, Jamaicans do not. They do not play. They don't want to be around it. They don't want to see it, anything. While I don't agree with that lifestyle, I don't mind being friends with individuals from that community. I think part of my tolerance is due to me being raised in the United States. You see a lot, you experience a lot, and you just learn to deal with things and tolerate things, even though you might not necessarily completely agree with it. These things I do think, positively affected my life. I think that, had I not been raised in the church and, with a good, strong upbringing, that a lot of decisions I made, though they were bad, they could have been worse. But I think I kind of played it safe for the most part, because I knew better. And, I think that kind of saved me from a lot, a lot of bad things, or a lot of things that could have went worse.
3.
Question for the week. 2 questions, actually. We saw last week that gender is what we do. Performance. Is sexuality the driving force behind what we do? In other words, is sexuality who we are, which then drives what we do? Second question, which is more simpler. How has your sexuality intersected with your other identity components? Intersected and impacted your other identity components, both negatively and positively. Happy